The book of Proverbs is not just a collection of sayings, it is a divine map for navigating life. Chapter 23 in particular confronts us with choices that shape our destiny. It speaks about discipline, self-control, resisting temptations, and pursuing wisdom above fleeting pleasures. Its words are not random, but strategic, meant to sharpen the heart and align it with God's truth. In this chapter, the reader is challenged to reflect deeply on relationships, pleasures, and the direction of life. Proverbs 23 unmasks illusions, exposing what appears to be joy but ends in sorrow, and teaching that wisdom always sees beyond appearances. The call is urgent, to live not for the temporary, but for what lasts forever. The wisdom of Proverbs 23 speaks to both the young and the mature. For the young, it is guidance that prevents ruin before it begins. For the mature, it is a mirror to evaluate choices and correct paths. No one is excluded from this call, for all need discipline and clarity to endure the storms of life. Its verses expose the dangers of excess, food, drink, laziness, and false prosperity. They remind us that what glitters today may enslave tomorrow. But at the same time, they point to the treasures of discipline, righteous living, and wise company. Each principle is a safeguard against ruin and a compass for safe living. The introduction of this chapter reveals that life is a battlefield of influences. Friends, desires, and habits either strengthen or destroy us. Wisdom is the armor that protects, discipline the sword that strikes, and truth the shield that defends. Without these, one becomes prey to fleeting illusions. With them, one becomes unshakable. Spiritually, Proverbs 23 reminds us that wisdom is inseparable from God. To live wisely is to live aligned with His truth. Every verse is a call to holiness, purity, and vigilance. The pleasures of the world are seductive, but they never satisfy. True joy is found only in walking with the Lord. Therefore, Proverbs 23 is not merely advice. It is an urgent invitation to resist what enslaves, to embrace what strengthens, and to live with eternal perspective. Whoever listens carefully and applies its wisdom will not only avoid ruin, but will inherit honor, peace, and eternal joy. Before we continue, if you enjoy our videos and feel that they have blessed your life, like and comment, even if it's just an amen. This makes a huge difference for this content to reach more people and impact lives. If you are not yet subscribed, take this opportunity to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share with your loved ones. This way, YouTube will get to know you better and recommend even more videos like this to help you on your faith journey. Help spread this message of faith and hope. Each like, comment, and share strengthens this work, which we do with all our heart to build up your life. Together, we can reach even more hearts. Continuing, life often places us before tables that dazzle our eyes. Proverbs 23 begins with a strong warning. When you sit to dine with rulers, consider carefully what is before you. The feast of the powerful may look abundant, but it carries hidden traps. The wise do not let their hearts be ruled by appetite, for self-control is their greatest wealth. At such tables, every choice can become a silent test. Therefore, it is better to eat little with peace than much with anxiety. The advice goes beyond food. It reveals how the world of influence, politics, and power is filled with appearances. A lavish table can hide manipulation, and an invitation may conceal subtle control. The wise discern the intent behind the gesture. Instead of being dazzled by appearances, they analyze motives with prudence. For power without justice corrupts, and influence without truth enslaves. Sitting before rulers is not only about eating, but about safeguarding your identity. Whoever loses themselves at the table of the powerful will also lose themselves in decisions. That is why self-control is presented as a shield. He who is master of his appetite is also master of his destiny. Those who yield to desire become easy prey, but those who govern themselves become free even in front of kings. The image of putting a knife to one's throat illustrates how radical discipline must be. It is not a matter of violence, but of seriousness in self-control. Whoever knows how to say no at the table also knows how to say no in life. Every time we restrain excess, we gain strength to resist greater temptations. That is why the wise see in food a training for integrity. This principle also applies to other areas of life. Wealth, pleasure, and fame often present themselves as delicacies, but each of them can enslave those who surrender. The banquet of life is filled with illusions, and the eyes must be trained not to be deceived. For not everything that glitters is gold, and not all invitations are safe. Wisdom is the filter that separates what builds from what destroys. In practice, being cautious before rulers means not exchanging values for favors. It is refusing to negotiate character in exchange for privilege. It is choosing to remain firm in truth, even when it costs opportunity. Whoever controls themselves in small things becomes unshakable in great things. The true banquet is not in the abundance of the table, but in the peace of a conscience kept pure. Therefore, learn from Proverbs 23, control yourself before the eyes of power. Do not be carried away by the brilliance of appearances, but by the firmness of truth. Remember that discipline in secret is the greatest demonstration of strength in public. Kings respect those who do not sell themselves, and God honors those who choose integrity above all. The greatest wealth of a man is not found in what he possesses, but in what he governs within himself. Proverbs 23 shows us that the lack of self-control turns abundance into curse, while discipline transforms scarcity into blessing. Whoever masters their impulses discovers a treasure more precious than gold. Self-control is the invisible crown that distinguishes the wise. It is not what you have, but what you refuse that reveals your true strength. Self-control begins with recognizing limits. The insatiable man never satisfies himself even with full barns. The wise, on the other hand, know that joy is not in excess, but in balance. Whoever eats beyond what they need ends up becoming a slave of their appetite. Whoever desires beyond measure is trapped by what they pursue. Restraint is the secret that preserves freedom. This principle applies not only to food, but to all of life. Wealth, power, and pleasure demand control. Whoever lets themselves be dominated by them loses direction. But those who keep their hearts disciplined remain standing when others collapse. For the greatest victories are not achieved in public, but in the invisible battles of the heart. Every no said at the right time is a triumph that multiplies in the future. It is important to note that self-control is not repression, but wisdom. It is not about suffocating desires, but about ordering them correctly. Whoever knows the right time to act is not a prisoner of urgency. Whoever discerns the right measure is not trapped by excess. Thus, self-control is not a burden, but a liberating power. It makes us masters of our destiny instead of victims of our weaknesses. In practice, the disciplined man achieves what the impulsive cannot. He saves while others waste, works while others sleep, resists while others surrender. The result is that his life rises steadily while others stumble. Self-control builds silently but produces visible greatness. For success is not built in noise, but in discipline. Spiritually, self-control reflects divine wisdom. Whoever governs themselves honors the Creator, showing that they value the gift of life. Every choice of restraint is an act of worship. Every decision for moderation is a declaration of dependence on God. Thus, self-control is not only an earthly principle, but also a spiritual act. It exalts the one who gave us freedom and calls us to live wisely. Therefore, remember, wealth without self-control becomes ruin. But discipline makes even the little become abundance. Do not measure your life by what you accumulate, but by what you conquer within. Whoever governs their impulses is richer than kings, and whoever keeps their heart firm in wisdom possesses the greatest treasure of all. How many run after wealth as if it were the guarantee of security. Proverbs 23 reminds us that riches sprout wings and fly away like an eagle toward the sky. This poetic image exposes a harsh truth: material possessions are temporary. Whoever anchors their life in them will always live in insecurity. For riches are like mist. They shine for a moment but vanish with the wind. The illusion of wealth lies in the false promise of permanence. Money seems to bring stability, but it cannot stop time, death, or betrayal. Many who built empires discovered overnight that everything could collapse. The market changes, the thief steals, the moth consumes. No treasure on earth is indestructible. That is why trusting in riches is like building on sand. The wise understand that money is a means, not an end. It must serve purposes, not dominate hearts. Whoever lives to accumulate discovers at the end that they gained much but lost themselves. Whoever uses it as a tool builds beyond themselves. The difference is not in what you possess, but in how you direct what you have. For wealth is neutral. The heart is what defines whether it blesses or corrupts. It is important to note that riches are not condemned, but their misuse is. The error lies in envy, greed, and dependence on them. Whoever trusts in wealth becomes enslaved. Whoever trusts in God becomes free, even with little. The eagle that takes riches away is the reminder that only the eternal cannot be stolen. That is why the wise learn to invest in what thieves cannot reach. In practice, this means valuing character more than possessions. Reputation, integrity, and faith are treasures that no crisis erases. Whoever cultivates these riches builds an inheritance that crosses generations. Money may come and go, but principles remain. That is why the wise live lightly, without fear of losing, because they know their true wealth is untouchable. The pursuit of wealth at any cost blinds the heart. Many sacrifice family, health, and faith in exchange for abundance that does not last. The cost is higher than the reward. The insensate believes they gained the world, but in truth, lost themselves. The wise prefer to lose money and keep their soul, rather than gain riches and lose peace. Therefore, listen to the voice of Proverbs 23. Do not run after what flies. Anchor your life in what does not pass. Remember that money is only wings, but God is the solid rock. Whoever builds on him does not fear storms. For true wealth is not in what you hold in your hands, but in what remains in eternity. Not every feast is a blessing. Some are snares. Proverbs 23 warns us against coveting delicacies that hide intentions. The beauty of a banquet may conceal the selfishness of its host. Appearances seduce, but the wise look beyond. They know that not everything set before them aims to feed. Some aim to trap. Discernment is the ability to see what lies behind the veil. Appearances deceive because they flatter. Luxurious tables, flattering words, false smiles, all designed to captivate the unwary. But wisdom teaches us to perceive intentions, not just actions. The insensate sees only the surface. The wise weigh the heart. For there is more truth in silence than in a feast full of lies. Being deceived by appearances is costly. Many have fallen into schemes because they trusted in beauty instead of character. They believed in words without weighing motives. They surrendered to the brilliance and ignored the darkness hidden behind. The result was pain, loss, and disappointment. Whoever does not discern ends up paying dearly for their naivety. The advice of Proverbs is clear. Do not covet. Do not desire everything you see. Appetite can blind judgment, and ambition can corrupt perception. Whoever lets themselves be dominated by appearances soon forgets the truth. But whoever trains the heart to discern avoids traps that others fall into. For discernment is protection against illusion. In practice, this means not being seduced by easy promises. It's better to lose an opportunity than to fall into ruin disguised as a gift. It is better to wait for God's approval than to accept men's applause. The wise refuse what seems sweet but hides bitterness, for their eyes are trained to see beyond taste. This principle applies to all areas of life. Friendships, business, and even relationships may hide hidden interests. Whoever walks in wisdom tests everything, discerns intentions, and keeps their heart safe. Appearances may dazzle, but only truth sustains. That is why the wise live cautiously, weighing everything in light of eternity. Therefore, do not be deceived by what shines. Train your heart to discern beyond the surface. Appearances may deceive, but truth never fails. Whoever sees with the eyes of wisdom does not fall into traps. And whoever trusts in God's light walks in security, even when the world disguises darkness as light. Life is too short to be wasted on what passes. Proverbs 23 exhorts us not to exhaust ourselves for riches that vanish. Labor that is focused only on accumulating ends in emptiness. But work directed toward eternal purposes produces inheritance. The wise do not pursue what rust consumes, but invest in what time cannot erase. Work becomes meaningful when aligned with values. The insensate runs after money and loses peace. The wise work with purpose and gain rest. Effort without meaning is exhaustion. Effort with direction is fulfillment. That is why labor must be guided by the compass of wisdom. For only then does sweat become fruit that endures. The text shows us that hope in the future is more valuable than the abundance of the present. Whoever works with their eyes on eternity does not despise the process. They understand that every seed planted in justice generates fruit that will not be lost. The insensate despises small beginnings. The wise see in them the root of great harvests. It is important to remember that work is not an end, but a means. It is the instrument God gives us to build, serve, and honor. Whoever works only to enrich themselves becomes poor in what matters. But whoever works to serve builds a legacy that goes beyond themselves. For serving is the greatest form of richness. In practice, working for what lasts means not exchanging principles for profits. It is refusing shortcuts that promise speed but lead to ruin. It is preferring the slow but safe growth of integrity to the fleeting success of corruption. Whoever chooses this path may advance slowly but advances solidly. This principle applies to spiritual life as well. Prayer, faith, and obedience are labor for eternity. Each act of devotion is an invisible seed that bears eternal fruit. That is why the wise do not despise the effort of today. They know the harvest will come tomorrow, for no seed sown in God's hands is ever lost. Therefore, do not wear yourself out for what fades. Direct your work toward what remains. Choose effort that builds, not exhaustion that destroys. Work with eyes on eternity, and your labor will never be in vain. For true reward is not in what you receive, but in what you build for generations to come. Proverbs 23 emphasizes the importance of seeking wisdom and instruction. Life is too complex to be navigated alone, and those who despise advice set themselves up for failure. Wise counsel acts as a compass when the path is uncertain. Listening to truth even when it hurts is what preserves us from traps. The fool believes he knows everything. The wise know they always have more to learn. Seeking advice is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. It takes humility to recognize limits and wisdom to accept correction. Many lives have collapsed because they despised the voice of the experienced. But those who honor guidance find safe paths. For every word of truth is like a lamp in the darkness, pointing the way to avoid ruin. The wise surround themselves with counselors who love truth. They do not choose flatterers, but mentors who confront. For a wound caused by truth is better than a kiss given by deception. That is why those who value instruction grow stronger with each season. Advice builds, shapes, and protects. To despise it is to walk blindly in a hostile world. This principle also applies to spiritual life. God often speaks through the lips of those he raises as guides. Refusing advice is like refusing divine intervention. The wise listen carefully and test everything in the light of Scripture. In this way, they discern what is eternal and reject what is false. For their trust is not in men, but in the God who uses them. Practically, wise counsel saves us from wasting time and resources. It avoids unnecessary wounds and prevents irreparable mistakes. The proud learn only from pain. The humble learn from words. That is why humility accelerates growth, while arrogance delays it. Whoever seeks advice advances more securely than those who walk alone. The fool despises guidance because he confuses independence with wisdom. But the truth is that autonomy without direction is just pride disguised as freedom. True freedom is to walk safely, and that requires guidance. Advice does not diminish the individual, it strengthens him. Whoever walks with wise mentors extends their life and multiplies their achievements. Therefore, learn from Proverbs 23, seek wisdom, buy truth, and never sell it. Value instruction more than treasures and discipline more than comfort. For those who embrace counsel build lives upon rock. The storms may come, but they will remain standing. For the power of wise counsel transforms ordinary lives into extraordinary journeys. Few rewards in life compare to the joy of parents who see their children walking in wisdom. Proverbs 23 teaches that the righteous child brings delight to his father and mother. This reveals that wisdom is not only personal, but collective. It impacts generations. Every wise choice confirms the value of the instruction received. Every act of integrity brings honor to the family. The joy of a righteous father is not found in the wealth his children accumulate, but in the character they demonstrate. For riches may vanish, but virtue remains. The father rejoices not because his son possesses much, but because he has become much. The wise child becomes living proof that discipline and instruction were not in vain. His life is a testimony greater than words. The fool, however, brings sorrow and shame. His choices dishonor the family and burden the heart of parents. That is why the text insists on instructing children early, so that later they may be pillars and not burdens. The joy or pain of parents is built day by day through the paths chosen by their children. That is why wisdom is a treasure not only for the individual, but for the whole household. This principle also reveals the power of legacy. Every parent who instructs wisely builds an inheritance beyond possessions. They leave principles that cannot be stolen and values that multiply. The righteous child preserves this inheritance and strengthens the house. The foolish child despises it and weakens generations. The choice of one impacts the destiny of many. Practically, a wise son is recognized in his respect, honesty, and love for truth. He honors his parents, not only with words, but with actions. His conduct becomes the greatest gift he can offer. For parents may desire many things, but the true dream is to see their children walking in the light. Every act of wisdom is a crown on the head of the family. Spiritually, this principle reflects the relationship with our Heavenly Father. Every choice aligned with truth brings him joy. Every step of obedience glorifies his name. We are children who, through wisdom, honor the one who gave us life. Therefore, living wisely is not only for ourselves, but also as an offering of love to God. Therefore, remember, wisdom generates joy, but folly generates sorrow. The righteous child strengthens his family, while the fool destroys it. Every decision is a seed planted in the heart of those who raised us. Whoever chooses wisdom not only preserves himself, but also honors the house from which he came. This is the joy of the righteous father, to see his children walking in truth. Proverbs 23 exposes the deceitful prosperity of the wicked. They may rejoice today, but their laughter is temporary. The banquet of the arrogant is adorned with luxury, but surrounded by shadows. What appears to be abundance is only a mask hiding emptiness. The folly of the wicked lies in trusting what cannot last. Their joy is a fleeting flame extinguished by truth. The wicked prosper through lies, oppression, and injustice. But their triumph is brief, for every empire built on deceit collapses with time. They boast of their conquests, but their end is shame. The wise do not envy them, for they know the fruit of corruption is bitterness. The fool admires, the wise discern, for behind every false glory lies inevitable ruin. This principle shows that the true measure of success is not what one possesses, but how it was obtained. Wealth without justice is curse. Status without truth is disgrace. That is why the wicked, though surrounded by luxury, are empty inside. They shine before men, but decay before God. Their laughter echoes today, but tomorrow it is silence. The folly of the wicked also serves as a warning. Whoever admires them is tempted to imitate them. That is why Proverbs reminds us not to envy sinners. Their path may appear wide and easy, but it leads to destruction. The wise prefer the narrow but safe road, for they know that God's justice always prevails. Practically, the prosperity of the wicked is dangerous because it seduces the heart. Many compromise integrity to achieve what they see others possessing. But the price of corruption is higher than the profit. The fool exchanges peace for wealth. The wise exchange wealth for peace, for the latter knows that what is eternal is worth more than what is temporary. Spiritually, the wicked represent those who resist divine truth. They live as if God did not see, but their end proves otherwise. For every act of injustice is recorded, and every arrogance will be judged. The fool ignores eternity. The wise prepare for it. The folly of the wicked is not in their success, but in believing it is permanent. Therefore, do not be deceived by the smile of the wicked. Their joy is short-lived and their laughter hollow. Choose not to admire what soon vanishes. For true greatness is not in abundance, but in integrity. The folly of the wicked is trusting what fades. The wisdom of the righteous is building on what remains forever. Proverbs 23 highlights the value of discipline as a path to wisdom. Correction may hurt for a moment, but its fruit is peace. The disciplined child becomes strong, while the spoiled becomes fragile. The wise embrace discipline as a gift, not a punishment. For only through correction do we become prepared for life. Discipline is the seed that blossoms into maturity. The reward of discipline is not immediate, but long-term. While others collapse in adversity, the disciplined remains standing. While the fool despises correction, the wise treasure it. For every rebuke is an investment in character. Whoever resists pain prolongs suffering. Whoever accepts it gains strength for the future. Discipline shapes not only behavior, but identity. It transforms impulse into prudence, weakness into resilience. The one who embraces correction discovers freedom. For true liberty is not doing whatever one wants, but mastering oneself. The fool is a slave to desires. The disciplined is free to choose wisely. This is the difference that defines destinies. In practice, discipline builds credibility. The disciplined person becomes reliable, responsible, and respected. Employers trust him, families honor him, and society recognizes him. The undisciplined may shine for a moment, but he cannot sustain himself. Discipline builds silently, but its fruits echo loudly. Spiritually, discipline is a reflection of God's love. For the Lord disciplines those he loves, like a father who corrects his children. Every trial, every correction is divine training. Whoever recognizes this grows in maturity and faith. For God is not interested in comfort, but in character. His discipline is proof of his care. The fool despises correction and seeks easy paths, but his journey ends in failure. The wise embrace correction and walk securely, for they understand that short-term pain produces eternal glory. The reward of discipline is security in the storms and honor in the harvest. Therefore, value discipline even when it hurts, for it shapes your future and preserves your destiny. The reward is not only personal but collective, for the disciplined inspire others. Choose the narrow path of correction, and you will walk on firm ground. For discipline today is honor tomorrow. Proverbs 23 reminds us that the future of the righteous is secure. Hope in God is not an illusion but a promise. While men's promises fail, the divine never does. That is why the wise anchor their lives in this hope. It is not based on circumstances, but on the eternal faithfulness of God. Hope sustains in times of trial. When resources end, it remains. When strength fails, it renews. The fool despairs at the first adversity, but the wise endure with patience. For they know that God's silence is not absence, but preparation. Hope transforms waiting into strength, The hope of the righteous is not only for this life, but for eternity. Even when death comes, their expectation is not cut off, for what awaits them surpasses all earthly glory. This makes them unshakable in the face of pain. While the fool clings to what passes, the wise cling to what remains. Practically, hope brings peace to daily life. The anxious live troubled by the future, but the hopeful walk lightly, for they know their destiny is in God's hands. This gives rest to the heart and clarity to the mind. Hope is the antidote to despair and the fuel of perseverance. The fool envies the prosperity of the wicked, but the wise wait for God's reward. They prefer to wait for eternal honor rather than temporary applause. Their eyes are fixed not on what is seen, but on what is promised. This makes them rich in peace, even when poor in possessions. Spiritually, hope is the anchor of the soul. It secures in the storm and calms in the uncertainty. Whoever loses hope becomes adrift. Whoever clings to it sails firmly. For this hope is not human optimism, but divine certainty. It is the light that never goes out. Therefore, never let go of hope, for it is the assurance that tomorrow will be better than today. It is the certainty that the righteous will not be disappointed. Proverbs 23 assures us, "Your hope will never fail." Whoever waits on God discovers that waiting is never in vain. Proverbs 23 highlights the power of influence in our journey. The people we surround ourselves with shape our destiny. A wise man seeks companions who strengthen his faith, while the fool joins those who corrupt his heart. Our friends are mirrors that reflect who we are becoming. That is why choosing the right company is one of the greatest acts of wisdom. The text warns not to envy or associate with sinners. Their path may seem attractive, but it leads to ruin. The fool thinks he can walk with the wicked and remain unscathed. But influence is silent, subtle, and inevitable. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise. Whoever walks with fools suffers harm. This principle cannot be ignored. Choosing the right company requires discernment. Not everyone who smiles is a friend. Not everyone who offers is sincere. The wise analyze not only words but fruits. They observe attitudes, not appearances. For true character is revealed in practice, not in speech. This vigilance protects the heart from future sorrows. This principle also reminds us that solitude is preferable to bad company. Many fear loneliness and accept any presence. But walking alone with God is better than walking accompanied toward destruction. The wise do not exchange peace for acceptance. They prefer the silence of integrity over the noise of corruption. In practice, choosing the right company means aligning yourself with those who value truth. It is walking with people who inspire, correct, and strengthen. It is distancing yourself from those who push toward excess and ruin. Every friendship is a seed planted in the heart. The fruit will depend on the soil chosen. Spiritually, company defines destiny. Whoever walks with the wise inherits eternal life. Whoever follows fools finds eternal loss. This principle transcends the present and extends into eternity. That is why the Bible emphasizes communion among the faithful. For it is through fellowship that faith is strengthened and wisdom multiplies. Therefore, pay attention to those around you. Choose wisely, for every relationship builds or destroys. Do not let comfort dictate your companions, but let wisdom choose them. Remember that whoever walks with fools will stumble, but whoever walks with the wise will shine. This is the legacy of choosing the right company. Proverbs 23 vividly describes the destructive effects of drunkenness. At first, wine may sparkle in the cup, enchanting the eyes and loosening the tongue. But in the end, it bites like a snake and poisons like a viper. What begins as pleasure ends as pain. The danger of drunkenness is not in its beginning, but in its inevitable end. Drunkenness steals clarity of thought. It corrupts judgment, exposes to shame, and opens the door to violence. Many homes have been destroyed because of excess drink. Words spoken under its influence cannot be erased. Acts committed in this state leave scars for life. That is why the wise abstain from what robs their control. The insensate, however, seeks refuge in the cup. They drink to forget, but only deepen the wound. They pursue joy but find emptiness. The apparent relief is but a mask for despair. Drunkenness promises freedom but enslaves. It promises laughter but produces tears. It is a deception that imprisons. This principle applies not only to alcohol, but to all excesses that numb the senses. Any practice that robs us of clarity is a form of drunkenness. Whether through substances, entertainment, or passions, the result is the same: loss of control. The wise guard their minds because they know their decisions shape destinies. In practice, avoiding drunkenness means choosing sobriety. It is preferring clarity to confusion, order to chaos. It is refusing what may bring fleeting pleasure but lasting ruin. The sober build, the drunken destroy. For control of the mind is the foundation of a fruitful life. Spiritually, sobriety is essential for vigilance. The Bible teaches that the enemy prowls like a roaring lion. Whoever is drunk in any form becomes easy prey. Sobriety, however, keeps the heart alert and the spirit strong. That is why it is not only a matter of health, but of salvation. Therefore, remember the warning of Proverbs 23, "Do not be deceived by the sparkling of wine. Behind the apparent pleasure hides poison." The wise prefer clarity over illusion, truth over intoxication. For drunkenness ends in ruin, but sobriety leads to life. Wisdom is not only learned, it must be practiced. Proverbs 23 exhorts us to apply our hearts to instruction and our ears to words of knowledge. It is not enough to hear, it is necessary to live. A heart applied to truth becomes shielded against lies and trained for discernment. The difference between the wise and the fool is not in what they know, but in what they live. Applying the heart to truth requires discipline. The world offers distractions, pleasures, and shortcuts, but the wise heart remains firm even when tempted. This strength is not born from talent, but from constancy. Daily practice creates deep roots, and roots grounded in truth resist any storm. Truth is not relative, but absolute. It does not change with men's opinions or adapt to times. God's truth is eternal, and whoever applies it to the heart builds upon unshakable rock. The one anchored in truth is not swayed by society's winds or modern illusions. Their strength lies not in applause, but in divine approval. A heart applied to truth rejects lies quickly. It does not negotiate values or accept half-truths. Integrity becomes its compass, guiding every step. The wise choose to live uprightly even when no one sees, for the truth is their greatest treasure, and they guard it with firmness. In practice, applying the heart to truth means choosing principles over conveniences. It is remaining faithful when easier to yield. It is being honest when dishonesty seems profitable. These daily choices shape character and destiny. The fruit is trust, respect, and honor. The heart that applies itself to truth also enjoys freedom. Lies enslave, for they demand more lies to be sustained. Truth, however, liberates, for it needs no disguise. Whoever walks in truth walks light, without fear of exposure. Peace flows from a clean conscience, therefore let your heart cling to truth. Do not only hear wisdom, but embody it. For the heart applied to truth becomes a beacon in the darkness. Proverbs 23 reminds us, wisdom is not in learning alone, but in living. Whoever lives truth becomes unshakable, and whoever embodies it becomes eternal. Proverbs 23 declares that a wise son brings joy and strength to his parents. Every choice impacts not only the individual, but also the family. The wise son becomes a foundation, while the fool becomes a burden. This shows that wisdom is never isolated. It multiplies through generations. A child's righteousness crowns the family with honor. The joy of parents lies not in their child's possessions, but in their character. The true inheritance passed down is not material, but moral. A wise son confirms the value of instruction and reflects the faithfulness of his upbringing. His life becomes a visible testimony that wisdom works. Every decision honors the legacy of his family. A wise son also preserves peace at home. Instead of bringing worry, he offers rest. His responsible choices protect parents from constant anguish. This peace is greater than any wealth, the certainty that the child chose the right path. For nothing relieves a parent's heart more than seeing wisdom in their offspring. Wisdom in children does not happen by chance. It is the fruit of instruction, discipline, and example. Parents plant seeds, but children must choose to let them grow. The son who applies wisdom honors his parents. The fool, however, despises correction and reaps ruin. The difference between joy and sorrow in the home lies in this choice. In practice, a wise son shows honor, respect, and protection toward his parents. His life is an extension of his family's reputation. By living wisely, he lifts their name in society. He does not shame them but exalts them. The wise son is not only a blessing to himself but to all around him. Spiritually, this principle mirrors our relationship with God. Just as earthly children bring joy to parents, righteous living brings joy to the Heavenly Father. Every act of obedience is a song of worship. Every step in truth glorifies His name. We are children who honor Him when we live wisely. Therefore, be a wise son. For your wisdom strengthens your family, honors your parents, and glorifies God. Proverbs 23 shows us that wisdom is not an individual journey, but a collective blessing. A child's life can either build or destroy the legacy of a household. Choose to build, and your family will be honored. Proverbs 23 warns us not to envy sinners, even if they prosper. Their wealth may shine, but it is temporary. The prosperity of the wicked is like smoke, visible for a moment, gone in the wind. Envy blinds the heart, making it desire what has no foundation. The wise resist the temptation to compare. For God's reward is better than man's illusion. The prosperity of the wicked is fragile because it lacks roots. What is built on lies and oppression cannot stand. Many gained riches, but lost their families, dignity, and souls. This is the true cost of evil prosperity. Envy, therefore, is foolishness, for it covets what will soon collapse. Focusing on the wicked distracts us from our own path. While we compare, we stop building. The envious live in frustration, but the wise live in contentment. Their eyes are not on the speed of others, but on the certainty of God's promises. Waiting on the Lord is more secure than running after riches. Envy harms not others, but ourselves. It corrodes joy, generates bitterness, and steals peace. The envious cannot enjoy their blessings because they are fixated on others. The wise, however, celebrate the little with gratitude. Contentment becomes their shield against frustration. The end of the wicked reveals the futility of their prosperity. While their beginning shines, their end is disgrace. The righteous may struggle now, but their end is peace and honor. Time exposes the truth. The prosperity of the wicked is but an illusion. The envy of fools proves costly, but the patience of the wise brings reward. Practically, resisting envy means fixing our eyes on eternity. It is refusing shortcuts and valuing integrity above profit. It is preferring to wait for God's reward than to chase man's applause. The righteous understand that their destiny is not measured by present circumstances, but by eternal promises. Therefore, do not envy the wicked. Their prosperity is an illusion, their triumph a lie. Anchor yourself in God's hope, which never disappoints. For while evil may shine for a moment, only good endures forever. The righteous will inherit peace, and their hope will never be cut off. Proverbs 23 teaches us that every effort, when guided by wisdom, bears fruit. Hard work never goes unnoticed, even when results are delayed. The fool gives up when harvest takes time, but the wise persist, knowing every seed has its appointed season. Work done with honesty builds a solid future. The reward is certain for those who do not faint. For perseverance transforms labor into legacy. The harvest never comes before its time. Whoever plants with patience understands this truth. The fool demands instant results. The wise wait for maturity. Abundance built quickly often vanishes quickly. But abundance built through discipline endures. That is why diligence becomes a mark of the wise. They know that time always favors those who remain faithful. Work also brings dignity. It strengthens identity and builds respect. The laborer who works honestly rests in peace. He does not fear exposure because his fruits are clean. His wealth is not only money but a clear conscience. This is the inheritance of discipline, peace greater than possessions. It is not only about working hard, but about working well. Effort without direction produces exhaustion. Effort aligned with purpose multiplies results. The wise direct their labor toward eternal values. They transform simple tasks into meaningful acts. For them, work is not only survival, but worship. This reward extends to future generations. The work of today becomes tomorrow's inheritance. The father who labors with diligence leaves not only goods, but principles. The son who receives such a legacy walks on firm ground. Work, therefore, is a seed planted far beyond our years. Spiritually, every act of work done with integrity honors God. He sees not only the result, but also the intention. When work is dedicated to Him, it becomes sacred. Nothing done in faithfulness is ever wasted. That is why the diligent live under divine reward. Therefore, do not despise work or faint under effort. Persevere, for every drop of sweat is a seed of honor. The reward may delay, but it will surely come. Work is not a curse, but a divine calling. And Proverbs 23 assures us, diligent labor will always be crowned. Proverbs 23 warns against the seduction of fleeting pleasures. Excess in food, drink, and desire promises satisfaction, but produces emptiness. Pleasure captivates the senses, but leaves the soul unsatisfied. The fool gives in to the moment and loses the future. The wise resist now to reap later. For what is temporary cannot sustain eternal joy. Fleeting pleasures are deceitful because they appear harmless. A small indulgence becomes a habit, and habit becomes slavery. Appetite without control destroys not only the body but the soul. Pleasure that begins as delight ends as prison. That is why the wise set limits and do not allow desire to rule. The pursuit of instant pleasure blinds to greater purposes. Whoever lives for the moment neglects tomorrow. They exchange inheritance for a meal, destiny for indulgence. The fool lives for now, the wise live for what remains. This is the difference between ruin and reward. Pleasures also deceive because they never fully satisfy. The more one consumes, the greater the emptiness. For nothing earthly fills the void of the soul. The fool seeks in excess what only God can provide. The wise find joy in simplicity, contentment in balance. That is why they walk free from cravings. Practically, resisting fleeting pleasures requires self-control. It is learning to stop before excess, to refuse when the body demands more than needed. Discipline preserves health, clarity, and destiny. The fool indulges and regrets. The wise restrain and rejoice. For the fruit of restraint is greater than the taste of indulgence. This principle shows that discipline today is freedom tomorrow. Every no said to excess is a yes to life. The fool exchanges long-term joy for momentary delight. The wise prefer to wait for what is lasting. Thus, fleeting pleasures lose their power over them. Therefore, do not be deceived by passing delights. They promise joy but deliver chains. Choose what remains, even when it requires sacrifice. For Proverbs 23 reveals, freedom is not found in indulgence, but in restraint. True joy is not in excess, but in balance. Proverbs 23 warns that laziness, manifested in excessive sleep, leads to poverty. Rest is necessary, but idleness destroys. The lazy prefer comfort over effort and excuse over discipline. The wise rise early to sow, while the fool wastes time in bed. Poverty is not only financial, but also moral and spiritual. Laziness begins subtly. A few extra minutes, a postponed task, a neglected duty. Soon it becomes a lifestyle of mediocrity. The lazy dream of abundance but never act. Their life is a cycle of frustration. For whoever does not plant cannot reap. Work is not a curse, but part of human dignity. God created man to cultivate and build. Whoever rejects this calling despises their own purpose. Laziness robs not only possessions, but identity. The idle become spectators of life while others advance. Wisdom distinguishes rest from laziness. Rest restores strength. Laziness wastes it. The wise know there is a time for everything, time to sleep and time to work. The lazy, however, exchange work for idleness. Their harvest is lack and disgrace. Practically, overcoming laziness requires purpose. Whoever has a mission wakes with determination. The lazy wait for motivation. The wise act to create it. This is the difference. One waits, the other builds. The future belongs to those who rise, not to those who sleep. Laziness also generates dependence. Whoever does not produce becomes a burden to others. The idle consume without contributing. The wise, however, work not only for themselves, but for those around them. Work is service. Laziness is selfishness. Therefore, do not let lazy sleep govern you. Rest as fuel, not as prison. Rise, work, and build. The effort of today is tomorrow's honor. Proverbs 23 makes it clear, laziness is the path to ruin, but diligence is the road to prosperity. Proverbs 23 paints a vivid picture of the end of drunkenness. At first, laughter and joy seem abundant, but in the end, there is pain, bruises, and sorrow. What began as pleasure ends in regret. The folly of drunkenness is trusting the beginning and ignoring the end. The wise see the outcome before the first sip. Drunkenness robs clarity of thought and strength of will. The drunkard says and does what he regrets later. He becomes vulnerable to shame, violence, and destruction. His laughter hides despair. His joy is false. The fool indulges but later reaps pain. The text describes the addict as one who suffers wounds but does not notice, falls but does not learn. He promises to stop but returns to the same cycle. This reveals the enslaving nature of alcohol. What seemed harmless becomes unstoppable bondage. The fool repeats mistakes, believing the result will change. Drunkenness affects not only the drinker, but everyone around them. Families suffer, children weep, homes collapse. What began as a private pleasure becomes public ruin. The tragedy is not limited to the cup, but spreads to all areas of life. This principle extends beyond alcohol. Any uncontrolled passion leads to ruin. Be it lust, greed, or obsession, the cycle is the same. Fascination, bondage, destruction. The wise identify and resist before reaching the end. The fool ignores signs and falls into darkness. In practice, resisting drunkenness means vigilance. It is having courage to say enough before falling. Many surrender to pressure, but the wise remain firm. Freedom is not surrendering to everything, but choosing what preserves life. Therefore, do not be deceived by the sparkle of wine. Its end is always the same, wounds and regret. Proverbs 23 shows that fleeting pleasure always ends in pain. The wise avoid what blinds, for their eyes are fixed on eternity. Proverbs 23 concludes with the image of the addict, beaten, confused, and enslaved. He wakes asking, "When will I have another drink?" This is the cycle of bondage. Seeking pleasure to escape pain, only to increase it. Addiction promises joy but delivers chains. Its end is always ruin. Addictions begin as choices but end as chains. What once seemed like fun becomes necessity. The addict believes he controls, but soon realizes he is the one controlled. Pleasure turns into prison. This is the deception of addiction, disguising slavery as freedom. The addict's soul becomes emptier with every indulgence. The more he consumes, the less satisfied he feels. Addictions are bottomless pits, never filled. True peace is not found in excess but in wisdom. Only discipline can break this endless cycle. Addiction goes beyond alcohol. It may be greed, lust, power, technology, or any uncontrolled desire. Anything that occupies God's place becomes idolatry. And all idols enslave. The wise watch their hearts, for freedom is not doing everything but living with restraint. Overcoming addiction requires courage. It begins with admitting weakness and seeking help. It is not fought alone, but with God's strength and the support of others. Surrendering to God is not weakness but victory, for His grace breaks chains that human effort cannot. Addictions harm not only the addict, but their loved ones. Families collapse, relationships break, and legacies are destroyed. That is why Proverbs 23 ends with such a strong warning. For addiction is not a private issue but a generational wound. Therefore choose freedom over bondage. Do not surrender your life to chains disguised as pleasures. Proverbs 23 shows, the end of addiction is ruin, but wisdom leads to life. God offers true liberty to those who choose him. This is the call of wisdom, freedom that lasts forever. As Proverbs 23 closes, its message becomes even more powerful. The warnings against drunkenness, laziness, and fleeting pleasures are not just moral lessons, they are lifelines. They reveal the inevitable end of those who despise wisdom and the glorious future of those who embrace it. The chapter is a mirror, forcing us to ask, which path are we walking? The conclusion shows that every choice has consequences. The fool surrenders to indulgence and ends enslaved. The wise resists and walks free. This contrast is not abstract. It is visible in daily life. Families, societies, and destinies are shaped by these decisions. And time always exposes who chose well and who chose poorly. Proverbs 23 does not offer empty promises but eternal truths. It does not hide the cost of wisdom, discipline, restraint, and vigilance. Yet it assures us that this cost is far less than the price of ruin. The fool pays with his soul. The wise invests for eternity. This is the unshakable law of life. The chapter also highlights that wisdom is not automatic. It must be sought and applied. It is not enough to know. One must live. The fool collects advice but ignores it. The wise embraces correction and grows. The difference between destruction and honor lies in practice, not knowledge. Spiritually, Proverbs 23 reminds us that only God satisfies the soul. Addictions, excesses, and fleeting pleasures enslave because they promise what only He can give. To live in wisdom is to live dependent on Him, anchored in His truth and guided by His Spirit. This is where freedom and joy are found. The conclusion also exposes the deception of envy. The prosperity of the wicked may dazzle, but it is temporary. The wise prefer eternal reward to temporary applause. Hope in God is a treasure that never fails. Whoever anchors in this hope discovers peace unshaken by circumstances. Therefore, Proverbs 23 ends with a call: choose wisdom, embrace discipline, and resist fleeting illusions. Do not sell truth for comfort or exchange eternity for moments. For life is short, but its consequences are eternal. The wise see beyond the present. The fool wastes it. Choose wisdom, and your life will shine with honor and peace that never end.